Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day and that you're looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one or two episodes that we're going to be doing here tonight. This is going to be fun, okay? First episode that we're going to do is 10 albums that changed my life, okay? I have Ken Cheshire here. How's it going, Ken?
Going well. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. And the one and only Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
Doing well. Happy to be amongst the group again.
Again, yes. It's been so long since we've seen one another, right?
It's
Um,
been hours.
yes, literally, yes. So ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we're doing two episodes back to back. This one is called 10 Albums That Changed My Life. So what each one of us have done is come up with 10 albums that you know, for us, it was an epiphany of to an extent. But there's a bit of a difference here. We're not going by the year that the album was released. We're going by the year that that we heard the album and that it literally changed our musical viewpoint or outlook on certain music. And we're going to bring that list to you. So, as is customary with these episodes, I will let my co-hosts go first, but which one to pick first? Well, let's pick Jim. How's it going?
Okay. Happy to
Okay.
be thrown into the lion's den first. I mean, again, my idea, so only fair that I'm the first one to walk the plank.
You're
So,
among friends. You're among friends. Do not
I
worry.
am among friends. Yes, the internet is full of friends too. So, for me, I'm going to start with 1976. So I would have been 11 years old. Um, there were albums that had entered my life before this, but I would have to say that this was the first one that really kind of made me sit up and realize about the breadth and depth of pop music within one album, and that an artist doesn't need to be constrained to a certain genre or a certain expected style, that they could be creative within their own rights, within their own wheelhouse. And that album, again, I heard it in 1976, but this album is from 1973. It's Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Now, of course, by that time I had heard umpteen gajillion, Elton John songs on both AM and FM radio. And probably I might have even had Elton John's greatest hits at that time. But, our greatest hits is, you know, just really a snapshot of various different things. And it really took my listening to and holding in my hands the three gatefold album of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road to really get that how much of a broad canvas that a musician and an artist can work with. Um, I mean, for those who don't know the album, it is basically Elton John and Bernie Taupin mastering just about every style that you could possibly think of, whether it's, Tin Pan Alley pop, prog rock, um, uh, glam rock. About the only one, the 30s movie ballads. About the only one that they don't really pull off is reggae. They try, but they don't really hit it out of the park on that one. To me, that's the only misfire of an album that is just, top to bottom amazing, amazing in its variety, amazing in its execution, and it's always my go-to when I want to hear Elton, because it's just the best single representation of what he and Bernie could really achieve together. So yeah, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road at the tender age of 11 really got my attention and turned me in a direction to appreciate more what an artist can do.
Mhm. Well, with a song like Jamaican Jerk Off, I can understand where you're coming from. and as Ken
Yes.
laughs his head off there. You know,
But the interesting thing is that, Jamaican jerk off, what precedes it is Gray Seal, which
yeah,
is this pseudo glam rock tune.
yeah,
And after that is I've seen that movie too, which is just drippingly gorgeous. I
mhm,
mean, the strings on that and just the piano line,
yeah,
the sentiment behind the melody, it's just astounding. So, it's like wham, a homer. I struck out on Jamaica, but step up to the plate again, wham, a homer. I mean, and this album is full of home runs.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding. This song has no title. I mean, 16 tracks out of 17 is not bad for,
That's a great batting average.
that's a good batting average for, one dud in a bunch is not bad at all. But
Is
Darn
that
right.
your first multi-disc album?
I don't think so. I think my first one would have been Beatles 67 to 70. But again, it was a greatest hits. So
Sure.
although as we've discussed it, we said, oh yeah, we can count compilations in there. That Beatles collection just kind of cemented more of the fact that, okay, this is the Beatles. It
Yeah.
as amazing as it was, it didn't open my ears or change my perceptions,
yeah.
than what was already there.
Yeah. Yellow Brick Road is huge, was
Oh,
huge.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
The
as a
second
song,
album he did in 1973 too, that
Yeah.
punk.
no, it's a good album. It's a good album. Then
Okay. Um, the first one on my list, I was probably right about the same age as Jim. Um, the album came out in 1969. Three Dog Night, Suitable for Framing.
Hmm.
I was a young lad at summer camp, and you know the you know out in the boonies kind of camp, just like old fashioned. And there was a stream that ran next to it, and on the other side of the stream was another camp for girls. I was in the boys' camp, and the girls were in theirs. At the end of the week, there was a dance in which the girls would come over, and so little 12-year-old me, didn't know what to do with that. But I remember whoever was spinning the 45 put on Three Dog Nights, Eli's Coming, and just, the girls just disappeared. It just blew my mind. Of course, a wonderful cover of a Laura Nyro song, Nero. Um, it just, after they finished playing it, I worked my way over to the DJ to see what it was. The album, it's got Eli's Coming, Celebrate, Feeling All Right, The Traffic Cover, Easy to Be Hard, just some of their really best stuff. And that just really kind of woke me up to a different kind of uh, a little bit harder of a sound. My parents were they were listening to the Carpenters and really the light pop stuff. Um, we didn't have a radio station in our town, and sometimes we couldn't get a strong enough signal from Tallahassee to hear anything. And even then, it was still just the soft pop stuff. So that really started me on the musical journey. It went long after that, I discovered the Who and whatever. But that Three Dog Night album is made me wake up and see what was there, what was out there, and start looking for what else was out there. So that's my number one, Suitable for Framing, Three Dog Night.
Cool.
okay, good choice. Interesting too. All right, my number one for me. I first heard this album in 1981. It would have been just 11. Oh my God, Abbey Road. as I said, growing up with three older sisters, music was always on. It didn't matter what it was. Radio, records, it didn't matter. My younger sister was dating someone who was an avid music fan and an amateur DJ. His name was Mario. He eventually became my brother-in-law. And he introduced me to, he would bring over these stacks of records, okay? Like yay high, okay? And you name it was in there. You had disco, you had Springsteen, The River, you had the Beatles. And Abbey Road was in that pile. And he played it for me. And I'm listening to this and I'm just, it blew my mind. I couldn't grasp. I liked what was going on, but it just just what I was hearing, just it was sonically, it was just like unbelievable, like Maxwell Silver Hammer and Come Together. And I love side two. I always loved the medley from side two. Even though, people say it doesn't start with the track Because, but when Because came on, I knew the medley was coming and that was it. I was floored. And I remember my sister Anna took me to the mall that was like 20 minutes away, and I bought my own copy of Abbey Road. And I remember being carried up the stairs into the house. Mario came out, would put me in his arms, and on his hip, I was accused of giving my members of my family hips because they had to carry me on their hips. And he looked at the album. He's like, Armando, he says, you're really getting into something really deep here. Like, this is not what you usually listen to. I'm like, I know, I like it. He says, okay, let's go. We'll put her on. We can listen to it again. I loved it. I loved just the whole experience of the album. To me, it was an experience. And I could just sit there in front of the stereo. My parents had, those old console stereos with the sliding doors.
Mhm.
Yep.
Many an album was played on that console stereo. Man, I'm telling you right now, it was amazing. Many a Queen album too. But yeah, Abbey Road for me was just sublime. And it blew the doors open for me as to what was possible to listen to. I was never really, I mean, I listened to the early Beatles stuff, but I was always into the later stuff like Revolver, Rubber Soul, mid 60s and later stuff. But when I heard Abbey Road, it was just like, I'm gone. That's it, man.
Yeah.
It was, and for an 11-year-old, I mean, this thing just blew me away. The
Yeah.
Golden Slumber, beautiful, just beautiful. So that's my first pick.
Cool.
I get it. I get it, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. As I see on my screen here, down to Jim for his second pick.
Number two. So this is actually one that is from 1977, which is when I first heard it, and 1977 is when I bought it. Um, up to this point, I had Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Beatles 67, 70. I'm sure I had a New World Record by Electric Light Orchestra. But this next album is the one that took all of the Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Herb Albert type of stuff that my parents had, and I was able to sort of build off of that and then come to like a deeper appreciation of this album because of that stuff. I'll say it another way. If it hadn't have been for that early training, if you will, I probably would not have embraced this album as wholly as I did. And that is the one and the only Asia from Steely Dan. Now, I bought this because I had heard Peg on the radio,
We all
and of
did.
course I had and of course I had just the backlog knowledge of Reel It in the Years, Do It Again. I had heard My Old School and stuff like that, and I'm like, okay, I am loving this Peg song. I want to hear the rest of the record. And I bring it home, I put it on, side one, as one would dutifully do, and it's Black Cow, which was, unlike anything else that I had heard from a rock genre, just in terms of how the chords were laid out, how the background vocals were arranged, what the solo was doing, the ending vamps and vocals and how it all came together. Tom Scott's saxophone solo, again, that was like a saxophone solo wasn't new to me in rock music, but hearing that kind of sax being played, whoo! And then from there, what's the next song? It's the title track, which, oh my, Steve Gadd
Yeah.
and Wayne Shorter.
Yeah.
There's my head on the ground, not being able to process what I just heard for the last 8 minutes. And it just goes on and on and on. And I was just struck dumb by just how absolutely amazing and astounding that album was. And that served as a further stepping stone to many other kinds of music that I would get into over the next years. But yeah, Steely Dan Asia may be the most life life-changing album that has crossed my path so far. It's and my appreciation of it hasn't lessened over the years. 1977, Steely Dan Asia. Boom.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay. All right, Ken, over to you.
Okay. My second album, released in 1973. Let's hear it for Columbia House Record Club.
Yay! Oh,
Um,
yeah. Back in the day, man, many albums were bought.
Oh yeah.
Cassettes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
It
Oh,
was
sweet
not only
Jesus.
my first multi-disc purchase, but it was a 3 record set, and we're
Ooh.
talking about Yes songs by Yes. I was familiar with Roundabout, Starship Trooper, um, from sampler discs that I would get at the record co-op at Florida State, because those weren't getting played on the radio where I lived. And looking at the Columbia House flyer, and I was kind of looking to get as much as I could for my penny. And I recognized the name, so I bought Yes songs, and it was the first prog I'd ever listened to. Because you can listen to Roundabout, Starship Trooper, I've Seen All Good People, and they have that sample of it, that taste of it. But this concert, at this time when they were on tour, just amazing. Um, and it's just the performance is just off the charts to me. It's just a little unfortunate that the recording technology wasn't quite up
Up
to
to
match
snuff.
it.
Yeah.
Um, However, that doesn't escape, it's still, I still go back to it. I mean, it starts off with the recorded excerpt from Firebird Suite, and
Mhm.
then it goes right into Siberian Khatru. And, just when that guitar comes in, Jim, you like to use the word incendiary, and it is.
Yeah.
And it's just, with 3 albums worth of material, it really is a journey. We use that term a lot here. But so you're getting some Fragile, you're getting, Close to the Edge, you're getting other songs too. And it just, at the time, was just such a complete picture of what this band was,
Mhm.
and was demonstrated that they could do this on stage. I'm sure there probably was a little bit of doctoring, of it, but you sure can't tell it. At least I can't. Um, so yeah, and that quite easily might be my first live album too. but that put me on, that opened the door to prog progressive rock for me. And to me, and Yes has released a lot of live albums, but this is still the one that's true to my heart. Yes Songs, 1973.
So I got a quick question on that, Ken. So you had said that you had heard things like "I've Seen All Good People" or "Roundabout," on the radio. Did did Alan White's, this is such a nerd question, did Alan White's drumming make it seem strange or odd to you, or was it even something that you noticed at that time?
I didn't notice. My brain was
Okay.
taking in all these things that were new, to my ear. Um, I'd I would probably notice it now if I paid attention. But even now, when I listen to it, I'm listening to, the whole thing,
Right.
because it is a single unit. I didn't have the knowledge and the experience to be able to pick something like that out back then.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I gotta tell you, I had Yes Songs on CD in the 90s. But I couldn't wrap my mind around what was going on in terms of just the arrangements, and it didn't sink in with me. And as a side note, as a kid, when you used to tape off the radio, like you tape songs,
Yep.
my my very first song that I taped off of Q107 in Toronto was a Sunday afternoon. I had one of those BASF tapes, and I was going to try taping for myself. The very first song I taped was Roundabout. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh my God, and I would have been 12. I would have been 12.
Yeah.
That and Take Me to the River. Talking Heads. So I mean, yeah, from one extreme to another. No, that's a good choice, good album. Um, we're gonna have these stories coming out. I'm telling you, it's funny.
It's a
Uh,
storytelling session. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah, wrapped around music. Okay, my number two is from 1975, but I first heard this in 1977, and it's A Night at the Opera. You know, I I remember seeing the video for Bohemian Rhapsody on American Bandstand in 75.
Wow.
I was sitting on my sister's lap. We were in the kitchen. It was a Saturday morning. Well, it was at noon, because American Bandstand was on at noon on ABC in Canada, and they were still considered an import, you know, uh, back in 75. And I remember watching that video and the head and shoulders shot and the black nail varnish and the whole bit. That threw me even then at the age of 5. And then we had moved. My neighbor, Eddie, who lived 2 doors down, always kept his windows open and played his albums. And he played, Zeppelin 4. He played, Crime of the Century, and the music would be coming through the window. And I remember sitting outside listening to him play A Night at the Opera, and I'm like, the hell is this? I mean, you had the Death on Two Legs with the distorted guitar, Brian May using the distortion pedal on the intro there. And then you had, 39, the folk track, acoustic guitar. And then you had um, I'm in Love with My Car, which was, by the way, the B-side to Bohemian Rhapsody. And just that, it just came at you, like with the piano and the guitars, raging away. It was just like unreal. And I remember begging him to give me the album, right? Like, and just let me have the album. Like, you can get yourself another copy. He's like, I'm not giving you my album. Like, you can go get it yourself. And I just loved it. I just thought, you know what? even the bombast of the Prophet song. I mean, it really didn't make sense. I liked what I was hearing. It didn't make sense to me at the time, but I loved the harmonies. I loved the music. I just thought, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I didn't get my own copy until 1982, right? But I remember it from 77, like as clear as day. And it's obviously it's stuck with me all these years. So I mean, yeah. To me, there was just nothing like it, you know, that was out there, and it was just a monster for me. Um, and no
Rightfully
other,
so.
just like no friends of mine knew anything about music. Like and because I've done episodes with Jim, and I would say like I've said to you before, what 6-year-old knows about Somebody to Love? Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it isn't something, it isn't a topic you talk to your friends about because you just don't talk about that kind of stuff. But this was the kind of stuff I was listening to, right? And that's the benefit of having older siblings around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's my second choice, Night at the Opera.
Sweet.
Good one.
Yeah.
I go deep. I go deep on this. So, all right, Jim, over to you for your third choice.
Numero tres. So
Steve.
again, we're sticking with an album at the time it was released, and this was something that I had to hear on my own from someone else before I said, "Yeah, I need to own this." And this is from 1981. I would have been 15 at this time, and is Moving Pictures by Rush. Now, the story behind it is that I had, you know, being in junior high and high school in the late 70s and early 80s in the San Francisco Bay Area, you had lots of guys walking around, who you would normally kind of put in the stoner. And these guys would usually wear, rock shirts, and the ones that you would see pretty often, besides Zeppelin or Queen, was Rush, and it was usually the 2112 Naked Man.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
T-shirts, belt buckles. People would like draw Rush logos on their shopping bag book covers, on their textbooks, all that kind of stuff. Um and all I'd really heard about Rush at that time was that they were metal. Now, that's what I was told, so that's what I was going with. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I'm gonna enjoy this. But being at a friend's house, um, the eldest daughter of the family had her Walkman lying around, and in the Walkman was Moving Pictures. And I said, all right, well, I'm just going to give this a shot. So I excused myself from the parents and went into the other room and put the earbuds on and turned it on. It happened to be on side B. So what I first heard was the Camera Eye, and that blew my mind. You know, just with the synthesizer beginning, the uh, polyrhythmic, jazz chops going on at the beginning, the guitar chords that were rock, but it wasn't like ear bleeding metal, and that bass just kind of propelling everywhere with these funky little runs that Geddy was putting in there. It's like, this is not what I thought it would be. And the more I listened, the more entranced I got. And by the time I got to turning it over onto side A, with Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, and YYZ, I'm like, all right, I'm sold. These guys are clearly not at all what I had expected them to be. And this is just so in my wheelhouse. And again, I'll kind of give credit to Asia for giving me the kind of vocabulary and understanding of musical complexity to be able to appreciate what was going on with Rush and what they were doing, compositionally and with the arrangements and whatnot. I still wasn't there. It's not like a prog switch went on in my head and I'm like, oh, I know kung fu. That didn't happen. But um but this was a major stepping stone of my kind of getting out of the ghetto of heavy metal bad. Now, I still don't like a lot of heavy metal, but I'm not gonna just dismiss it offhand, because I get that there could be something really substantively great within that genre as well. So
Mhm.
that's how that changed my musical life. Moving Pictures, when it was released in 1981. Boom.
So that's when you started hanging out with the Stoners, right?
Yes. Absolutely. I changed my wardrobe. I didn't bathe, dropped out of my classes, all that stuff.
I could see that about you. I could. All right.
That was that. Yeah, right.
He want, ladies and gentlemen, he wants to swear at me, but he's not going to do it. He's too much of a gentleman to do
No,
that.
I'm trying to come up with some other, sarcastic comment about, like, yeah, I talked to my classmates and,
No, no, no.
at high school, and they'll tell you what a stoner I was.
It's fine. It's fine. Oh, it's interesting to hear these stories, right? Like from you guys about how these albums came into your lives and the effect they had on you.
Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
that's one of the great things about music is that you're able to relate it, you relate it as parts of your life to other music fans, and they're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Because we know it's not just sound coming out of speakers, it has some sort of connection to us, viscerally, emotionally,
Yeah.
so that's why it's great to be able to talk about it within this context.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. All right. Over to you, Ken.
Okay. I'm going about as far in the other direction as possible. Um,
Okay.
the year is 1974. Um, I have a half brother from my dad's first marriage who's about 15 years older than me. So, um, we never lived together. He came and when I was in junior high, lived with us for about a year. He was a guitar player. He had been on the road for a long time playing guitar. And so this is the only album on my list that I can give credit to a family member, older sibling.
Mhm.
Um, and that is from a band called Atlanta Rhythm Section in their third album, which is the third annual Pipe Dream. Uh, this came out a year after Leonard Skinner's debut album. And growing up in the South, anything Southern was embraced immediately by most everybody. And the only Skinner song at the time I really could identify was Freebird, off the first album, obviously. And my brother brought home Atlanta Rhythm Section, third annual Pipe Dream. There's two singles off of it. One is called Doraville, and the other is called Angel, What in the World's Come Over Us. And the second one in particular, Angel, it's like about a 6 or 7 minute song, which is kind of unusual for that. But this album really caught my attention. It's unlike Skinner, it's got a lot of blues influence, which would eventually lead me to the Allman Brothers, um, and
See that.
who I adore. So, but this was my entry into uh, the blues rock aspect of Southern rock. This album, plus the following two albums, Dog Days and Red Tape, are just it's the perfect trifecta for me.
Hmm.
The vocals are incredible. The guitar playing is just amazing. And this is before they got uh, you know, kind of pop fame with some of their, you know, singles and stuff a little bit later on. This is when they were doing the rocking thing. And
So this is not So Into You. It's not Imaginary Lover.
exactly. I
Okay.
mean, they do have ballads on these three albums, and they're very good, but they're not top 40 I use word tainted, you know. Um,
Okay, that's a good word to use.
it was
Okay.
yeah, at this point they were doing their thing. Third annual Pipe Dream is they chose that title because they had made two albums prior to then that just really didn't sell. And so it's like, okay, we're going to give it one more shot. And this is the one that took off. It's mostly a regional, bestseller. The one single Doraville, Georgia is where they were from. So but anyway, like I said, this was a stepping stone into the blues rock of the South that
Mhm.
would lead me to the Allman Brothers, which takes it to a complete different level.
Yeah, it would.
And
Yeah.
and if it wasn't for my brother George, I probably would have discovered it at some point, sometime, but that was just at the right time.
Mhm. Interesting. I wanted to buy that Atlanta Rhythm Section box set that's been out for about a year now, but I have not pulled the trigger on that SOB yet. I haven't done it. I don't know if I should or not, but let's pay
Yeah,
down
I
some
hear
of the
you.
bills first, shall we? And then we'll move on and we'll think about it.
I don't want to be party to any more of your purchases. I need to step away from that.
I would never blame you or use you as an influence. It's all on me, okay?
I'm gonna
Uh,
I'm gonna wield those bullets very, very carefully.
oh Lord. Okay, fine. Okay. All right. Okay, my choice for number three. I, this album came out in 76, but I honestly did not hear this album or of this album until 2007. There, I don't know about you guys, but for me, there have been certain times in my life where I'm gonna put this. I'm always looking for new music to listen to, like a new artist to get into, just something to discover. Um, just to break out of what I consider to be the norm of what I have in my collection. And this album, I mean, I've always known of this artist for years, obviously, but until I heard this album, I could not believe what I was hearing. And that album is Hygieia. There was a documentary I mentioned it before called "This Beat Goes On." It was put together by the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, in Toronto, and they did three 90-minute documentaries on the Canadian music scene in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the 70s installment is called "This Beat Goes On," and it covers your standard, like Rush, BTO, April Wine. Then they came to Joni Mitchell, and it just like blew me away. I mean, they're talking about how Murray McLaughlin was saying how she had gained respect from the jazz community, right? And then they played Amelia, and I was just, what is this? I could not. It was a mind melt moment for me. I could not fully take in what was going on, just the beauty of the song, of the guitar playing, just the intricacy, but she made it, the intricacy of the track, but she made it sound so simple in her playing, just very elegant and eloquent. And the whole album, I mean, when I dive into it, when artists, guys, I dive in. I bought this album and I bought Hissing of Summer Lawns. I bought Court and Spark. I bought, everything. As anything I can get my hands on. But Hygieia was really the album that really pulled me in, songs like Coyote and again Amelia and Song for Sharon and Refugees of the Road. It's just like what am I hearing? Like, this is just so different from what I was used to listening to.
Mm.
And it just opened another door for me to go through to discover something new. And I've always thought of this album as just a mind-blowing experience and just an entity all unto its own, you know, within her canon of albums. And I mean, she's taken her listeners on a lot of trips, but for me, when I heard this album, just the maturity of the compositions, and it blew me away. It blew me away.
Mhm.
You don't have to be bombastic in your playing. You don't have to be, drum solos here and there and guitar solos. You just have to be able to present your music in a very sophisticated, eloquent way. And she does with this album. And it's, you know, I'm lost for words with this one. I can't get over how beautiful it is. And then it led me into Pat Metheny even more. I mean, I knew of Pat Metheny before this, but I realized he played with her, and Jaco Pastorius, and it's just like, okay, but she was the catalyst for this whole going into jazz fusion. So, but Hydra was a real mind blower for me, an eye opener.
You know what? You said that you discovered this in 2007.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me, and you mentioned it, Hajira was released in 1976. And as fresh and innovative and, kind of far and away from what everyone else was doing as it was in 1976,
Mhm.
it's still that way in 2007.
Yeah.
It's like people hadn't cracked that code or touched it. There's just something so intimate and enigmatic and poetic
Yeah.
about that album. It's
Yeah.
just it's stunning still.
It's musical poetry
Yeah.
to me. It is musical poetry. And it just opened the possibility of something new to me to listen to and get into a new genre of music. And yeah, it stands the test of time. I mean, it's there,
Yeah.
and no one can take it away. No one can erase it. Even if they wanted to try and re-record it or say that this is the new Hajira. No, 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 no. Forget that. You only have one album with that name, with that quality, with that beauty, and this is it. So
Yep.
that's my third pick.
Good choice.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you approved, Jim. All right, down to you for your, because you see where you are on my screen, you're down below me. So down to you for your number four.
Okay, well, for what it's worth, you're over there for me, and Ken's down there for me. So
Yeah,
this is going to look really screwy.
I
So,
don't
oh well.
understand this. I don't get it, but that's the way it is.
Technology. What do we
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
Okay, my number four is an album that came out in 1983, and that is when I first heard it. This album was my gateway drug into jazz. Um, I think there were people who would say, "Oh, this isn't, how dare you say this is jazz?" And I just go away, leave me alone. I don't want to
Yeah,
have that argument with you.
yeah,
But
yeah,
this
yeah.
album is the one that opened my whole world to the Pat Metheny group, and that is Travels, the double album that came out in 1983. Um, we've talked about it at length because
Yes,
you can.
yes.
Double album, like half of the album were brand new tunes. This wasn't just a standard, oh, let's do live versions of the stuff that's been in our previous albums. No, half of this sucker is just tunes you hadn't heard before.
Mhm.
Um, the great big encyclopedia in the sky puts this in the category of jazz fusion, but that's doing it a disservice because the elements of Latin, folk, um, ambient music, just the whole cinematic scope that Matheny and Mays take to their compositions, puts this way beyond the category of jazz fusion, which is mostly kind of seen as this, you know, ghetto of like Return to Forever and Weather Report. And that's kind of the image I think that comes in people's mind when you say jazz fusion. And I think Travels just busts that wide open. It's not constrained by those kinds of barriers. And so the reason that this was a pivotal album for me was that it really, again, kind of, it's like all these have a progression. You go from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road to Asia, from Asia to Moving Pictures. Because of all those stepping stones, I was then able to have the ear to appreciate what was going on with Travels. Travels had the variety of a Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. It had the harmonic and chordal density that you would get from Asia. It had the chops of what you would get from Moving Pictures. And so it was just all sort of building into this epiphany where, because I have had these previous touchstones, I was able to appreciate this. And then from here, it opened my ears to the vocabulary of, more traditional jazz. And that had a huge effect on my listening life. And, again, I sort of put this down to my hearing Are You Going With Me in high school, and thinking, oh my gosh, what was this? What is this? I really need to hear more of this, with just, this, groovy bossa nova beat with this, harmonica solo that isn't a harmonica, and a trumpet solo that it ain't a trumpet. It just took it took what you expected and just completely turned it on its head. And again, the just absolute mastery of Mays on the keyboards and Metheny on the guitar. It's just peerless stuff. So again, my head is there on the floor, having spun off of my neck, really just in awe of what I was hearing. Pat Metheny, Group Travels, 1983. So that would have been me at age 18.
Okay. Yeah,
Nice.
I still need to get myself a copy of Travels, and I eventually will. Yeah. All right, Ken, over to you.
Okay, my number 4, 1975. So I would have been probably, I guess, a sophomore in high school. This was before AOR radio. And here again, it was difficult to get a clear radio signal out of Tallahassee. But the radio station that I could get was a top 40 station. And it just got to the point that I felt that 98% of what they were playing was either disco or the real bubblegum pop. Neither one did anything for me. I was learning guitar. I was in beginning band in high school, so I was really honing in on music. That was my primary interest. But I was getting so tired, I mean, the radio and what few albums that I had, I was getting discouraged. So I turned the radio off, and I said, and I prayed. I said, Lord, you know how much I love radio, how much I love music, but I just really don't like what's out there. But I make a deal with you. I'm going to just turn it on. If I like what's playing, I'll just hang in there. If I don't, I'm going to chunk my radio. And I was serious about it. So I took a deep breath, turned the radio on. Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen was playing.
There's a baptism there,
no doubt.
son.
Yeah. It's like, be careful what deal you make with God, because I tell you what, he'll come through.
Yeah.
And I never heard the song. That was the first time I heard the song. And what played after it was crap, but I stuck with my with my promise. And I've talked about Born to Run on this channel before, and at the time, he was on the cover of Time and Newsweek the same week.
Yeah,
One of the
he
very,
was.
very, if not the only time that's ever happened. Um,
Mhm.
Columbia Records were promoting him as the new Bob Dylan, which they just didn't know his music very well. I could
Yeah.
see where, someone in promotions would come up with that. But so I
Little
got the
marketing
album.
dweeb.
Yeah, yeah. So I got the album as soon as I can. Put it on track one. You got piano and that harmonica coming in at the beginning of Thunder Road. And it's
Oh,
just that, and the vocals come in, and it just builds, and just song after song after song. And you know me, I love a good album closer. And with Jungle Land, holy cow. It
Yep.
just it just it was just the coup de grace. It was just the perfect
yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
so uh not just the title song, but the entire album just said okay. Um and I was very thankful that it was getting the exposure and popularity that it was. And because it was almost like, okay, here's a good strike back against disco, or bubblegum pop or something, for
yeah.
us rockers. Um, Looking back, there's some of that other stuff that I can appreciate for what it is, and that's cool. Um, but that's nostalgia though. But Born to Run, um, yeah, that memory is so clear in my head that day that I made that deal with
Mhm,
God, and He came through.
mhm.
And music has
Wow.
has been my first love ever since. Still is.
If you're gonna if you're gonna keep listening to music, Born to Run is a good way to go. Thunder Road. I mean, like, come on. It's a good it's a good story. It's a good choice. I just a side note, I really didn't. I mean, obviously I knew it was Springsteen, but I really didn't appreciate him until my mid-teens. Like, The River and albums like that. I really didn't get into him fully until that. I mean, everyone knew Born in USA, right? That was a juggernaut. But to get into his deeper albums like, Darkness on the Edge of Town and The River, it music comes to you when it's supposed to,
Mhm.
you know. Um, but no, it's a really good
Yep.
choice. Yeah. Um, my number four, ladies and gentlemen, album came out in 1972, but I did not hear this album until 1986. We are talking about the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I was at a friend's place, and he was a big audiophile, and he showed me the album cover, and he says, "You need to hear this. You really need to hear this." And I was like, "Okay, all right." And he says, "You know who David Bowie is?" I said, "Yeah, Ashes to Ashes, I know." He says, "Hold on 1 second." Puts this album on. Then he turns over the cover where it says, should be played at maximum volume. He ain't played at maximum volume, but damn near close. And the opening comes in on 5 years, the drums coming in. And I'm like, okay, all right, and the lyrics pushing through the market square. And it's like, okay, what is this? And he just said, hold on, just listen. And I was just blown away. I mean, thin drum sound or not, because of the Trident drum sound, it didn't matter. I loved what I was hearing, and I was hooked. The idea of this rock star, alien rock star coming down to Earth, and basically in the end being destroyed by the energy that's being fed back to him from his fans, and they're like, you know, it's like, holy shit, like, what is this? He says, you need to get yourself a copy. And I tried to. and I couldn't find it because at that point RCA had stopped pressing it. He was in limbo with RCA.
Right.
You couldn't get an RCA copy of The Rise and Fall. Um, but it's an amazing album. It is an amazing album. It's a the storyline is loose. It's a loosely based storyline. Like it's a loose concept. It's not a concept album per se, but every song works and every song tells a story. I just couldn't get over it. And then realizing, my God, Bowie with with the outer space outfit and stuff, and the makeup and the red hair, like the whole and that's who it is. Like it didn't register right then and there, but when it did, I fell hook, line, and sinker. I tried to find every album I could, and this was the album that really sort of just started me on that path. Right, I just amazing. Just an amazing album. Um, and you know what? All the remixes, all the remasters, trying to fix the sound or whatever, it's still perfection to me. It's still a good album. And sometimes when you try and fix something too much, you ruin it. If you guys out there, I finally got myself about 3 years ago an RCA pressing for $80. Okay. I'm a moron, but I did it and I still have it. So if you guys out there can find yourself a good RCA pressing of Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust Inspires from Mars, go for it. Right? It's an amazing album. And you really should. It needs to be listened to as a whole. You can't just cherry pick tracks. And yes, everyone talks about Suffragette City and Ziggy Stardust, the track, and It Ain't Easy. Listen to it as a collective.
Yeah.
You really
Yeah.
need to. So, all right, that's my number 4. Back down to Jim. All right, Jim, over to you for your number 5.
My number 5. Okay, so this would have been 1984, and throughout 81 through 84, I have become an increasingly more rabid Genesis fan, mostly through Face Value to Abacab to Three Sides Live to Shapes. But I was pretty ignorant of anything prior to Abacab. I may have had Duke at that time. I honestly don't recall. But in college, in the dorms, I was talking about Genesis with someone, and I told him, "Oh yeah, I really like Abacab and Three Sides Live," and he's like, "Come here, need to show you something." He goes to a shelf, reaches up, and takes out this album from 1977, double live album, Seconds Out, and he says, "This, my friend, this is Genesis. Take this back to your dorm room, tell everyone to go away, turn it on, and report back." So I did. Side 1, great. Fantastic. Side 2, even better. Amazing. With Firth of Fifth and I Know What I Like. Amazing. Side 3, with the whole of Supper's Ready. Unbelievable. I had heard of Supper's Ready, but I had never heard it. And this was just, from Apocalypse 9/8 on, I was hooked. And then side 4 just left me utterly speechless with Cinema Show, Dance on a Volcano, and Los Endos. This opened my ears to what prog rock could be. And I would say it's a pretty safe entrance point because you're not distracted by too many key changes and too many odd time signatures, too many capes and Arthurian legends and
Yeah.
things of that nature. So for people who were new to prog, and I should also say, I mean, I had heard Roundabout on the radio, loved it, heard some ELP, heard Tull and these kinds of things, but I had never really gotten prog until I had heard Seconds Out. So again, with each little building block in my musical journey,
Yeah.
the everything that I'd heard before kind of really prepared me for the complexity that lives within Seconds Out and just the amazing performances too. I mean, I wouldn't have appreciated um, the double drumming between Phil Collins and Bill Bruford in Cinema Show unless I had had, Travels, Moving Pictures, and Asia under my belt. Those all, prepared the soil, if you will, for me
It
to
was a
really
progression for
accept
you.
that.
It's a
It was a
Yeah.
progression to Prague. Yep. So yeah, 1984. So I would have been, 19 years old. Seconds Out from 1977 really was a stunner to me and remains one of my all-time favorite albums, live or otherwise.
Excellent.
Yep. Excellent choice.
Yeah.
All right. Ken, over to you for your number 5.
Okay. The year is 1978. Armando, you were talking earlier about a friend that was an audiophile. This was thanks to the first real audiophile that I ever knew. It was my senior year of high school. This was a guy that was probably about 4 years older than me. I knew him through some mutual friends, and growing up in the sticks of North Florida, him and another guy were living in a trailer on a dirt road stuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. I don't like where
And
this is going, but okay.
But he was an audiophile.
yeah. And so the first time I went and visited, I saw this huge stereo component system, separate amp, separate, receiver, blah, 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 huge speakers. And I was just like, wow.
In the candy store.
Yeah, really. And so I said, this is amazing. Does it sound as good as it looks? He goes, let me show you. He reached in his crate and pulled out an album, and it was Elvis Costello's second album, This Year's Model. And he slapped that sucker on, and it stood the opening track, No Action, and he cranked that up to about 8.5.
Holy jeez.
Man, just totally speechless. This album, No Action, This Year's Model, Pump It Up, Radio. It's just an absolutely killer.
Yeah.
It was my first foray into what could easily be considered new wave at the time. 78. I mean, this was the early days in which was going to make a huge influence on music in the 80s, which was going to be my college years. And here again, as soon as I could get into Tallahassee to the record store, I bought this and his first album too. And I wouldn't get my own really good stereo until 85, but I didn't care. My little old dinky radio, turntable, whatever, I'd put it on and crank it up. And I've been a huge Elvis Costello fan ever since, as I've mentioned here before. And that was the perfect album for that time, because it's the first album with the Attractions, who I think were, they were the perfect band for Elvis Costello. You know, his first album, he didn't have the Attractions. He used Clover, and which were some of the members of the News, Huey Lewis's group.
Okay.
And but here he had a backing band that could keep up with him, and at the same time allow him to push the envelope even farther. And with incredible production by Nick Lowe, um, I mean, to listen to this album, you know, cleaned up, and it's amazing how sonically phenomenal this album is for what it is. You know, this isn't prog. This isn't anything fancy. This is just, you know, good all, you know, upbeat rock and roll, new wave, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
And so as each of the other albums I've talked about have taken me into a different genre, this is the one that started me down the new wave path that I would ride high, you know, for the next 15 years at least. So this year's model, 1978, Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
Okay. Yeah.
Great record. Really great.
I found it interesting to hear about Elvis Costello. He got banned off of Saturday Night Live for life, apparently, because he he was on, he was booked as a musical guest. He started to play one song and he stopped the band. He said, "I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we can't play this song. We're going to play this song instead." And they went into radio,
The
and
radio.
yep.
Yep.
And Lauren Michael said, "You will never play this show ever again. You are banned for life." And he's never had him back on the show. Whatever. I mean, I can't, you know, it's like when they, you know, when the Doors played Ed Sullivan and they
Oh, Ed
wanted them to
Sullivan, yeah.
change the lyrics to, you know,
Light My Fire.
yeah,
Mhm.
Light My Fire, and he didn't. And the producer comes, or the talent scout comes on and says, "You'll never play Ed Sullivan again." Jim Morrison said, "We just did." I mean, it's like it's done. We don't need to come back, you know.
Well, the thing about it is one thing I've always loved about Elvis Costello is his talent at writing lyrics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
yeah,
if you weren't really sharp and on the ball mentally, you wouldn't know the political commentary he was doing in these songs. You know, and that's why they didn't want him to play radio. So,
yeah.
like I said, I should have just let him do it because, like, who's gonna know?
You know
Nobody
what?
can tell.
Yeah, I mean, and not to belabor the point, but I think we have been politically corrected to death. And I think it's about time we, you know, as I said to you before about something else, take the pickle out of our butts and breathe a little bit, have a little fun. You know what I mean? Just like, just relax and just enjoy, you know, enough is enough. But no, it's a good choice. It's a really good choice. I got to start investing in some more Elvis Costello. Thanks a lot, Ken. Jesus Christ. My bank account's going to go down. I'm telling you, it's like, between Kate Bush and, you know, like, oh, please.
Pick up where Bill left off. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. My number 5, guys, is an album that I've known of since 1980, but never really appreciated it until when I grabbed it in 1988, and that is Pink Floyd's The Wall. It's been talked about to death, but you know what? I'm going to talk about it some more. You know, this album gets a bum rap about it being, you know, it's a double album. There's a lot of fluff on it. It should be a single album. I I disagree with that 100%. This was the first album that I listened to that introduced me to theatrical rock. That I listened to. It's the first album I listened to as a whole, as a one concise piece from start to finish, from side 1 to side 4, not skipping any tracks and getting the drama and the heart, the melancholy, the horror, the love, the alienation, all on four sides of vinyl in this story. The music is exquisite, beautifully recorded and produced. Just an amazing body of work that works as a whole. You cannot chop this album up. And I remember it was February of 1988. I went downtown. It was snowing at the time. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was snowing quite heavily, and I went into A&A Records, which again is no longer in Yonge Street anymore in Toronto, closed down. And this was a store where you could get like German and Japanese imports. Do you remember back in the day when you could go get Japanese imports and they didn't cost you an arm and a leg and a mortgage?
Yep.
It was just, well, I found this on one of the walls, like on one of the racks for like $8.99. And I thought, all right, I'm snapping this SOB up. I'm taking it. I couldn't reach it, so I had to ask someone to hand it to me. He's like, I couldn't reach because of the chair. So I took it home and I listened to it and put the headphones on and I just leaned back like this and I was off. And it just drew me in. It drew me in. The story, the music, just the way it was laid out, the whole concept of it. And I would literally take a Sunday out of my, every Sunday, take 2 hours out of my day and just sit there and just listen to it from start to finish. I loved it. And it was because of this I got into Dark Side of the Moon. And, later on, Wish You Were Here. But this was the album that started it off for me. And I will go to my grave saying that this is in my opinion, very humble opinion, one of the best concept albums, if not the best rock concept albums that there is out there. It's a perfect marriage of theater and rock. Ladies and gentlemen, Armando Venditti here along with Ken Cheshire. The episode 10 Albums That Changed My Life is going to have to be done in 2 segments due to circumstances beyond our control. So we'll be back to you with part 2 of this wonderful episode very soon. Thank you very much. Have a good day.